What is stain? Stain is a liquid or gel that's used to treat woods in order to provide it with protection and/or coloration. It's often used on decks, fences, and pergolas in order to provide them with protection against the elements like sun and moisture. There's a variety of different colors and shades when it comes to stains, ranging anywhere from transparent to solid. They can also be used for indoor woodworking projects like trim, cabinets, furniture, or banisters. Because staining for indoor purposes is largely done for aesthetic reasons, I'm going to talk about exterior staining in today's video. What are the different types of stains and their pros and cons? The first type is transparent stain. Transparent stains are pretty much what they sound like. Even though they're transparent, they do contain a little bit of pigments, which is what helps to provide protection against UV radiation, otherwise known as sunlight. One of the biggest pros to going with a fully transparent stain is that they penetrate the wood, providing protection against moisture from within. That also means that they won't blister or crack with age, and they won't get slippery when wet. Transparent stains can be an excellent way to preserve the natural beauty of any wood by bringing out the grain and luster of the wood. Some of the cons to going with a transparent stain is that they need to be reapplied frequently, in some cases every year. Another con is that you can't apply transparent stain over a painted surface. Lastly, they don't provide as much protection against sunlight as some of the more heavily pigmented stains do. Semi-transparent stains have slightly more pigments than transparent stains, however they still allow the wood grain to show. They're great for adding darker hues back into old discolored sun-bleached deck, but still providing a natural looking finish. They provide decent moisture resistance, and fortunately, when it comes to restaining, all you have to do is wash your deck down and reapply stain. One of the downsides is that they don't last as long as some of the other stains I'm about to talk about. Also, semi-transparent and transparent stains often tend to be oil-based, which is harder to work with because you can't clean it up with oil and water, and they have high VOCs, which means it's harmful for the applicator and the environment. Also, overspray is much more likely because oil-based stains tend to travel further in the air. And trust me, you don't want to get oil-based stains on your neighbor's house or on a nice car, because it's going to take a ton of time and money to get that off. So if you're a DIYer, look for a water-based stain. Semi-solid stains are a step up from transparent stains in terms of protection against sunlight due to the increased pigments. That also means that it will darken the wood more, hiding some of the wood grain underneath. However, you'll still be able to see some of that pattern or grain showing through the semi-solid stain. Semi-solid stains land somewhere in the middle of the spectrum in terms of longevity. They usually need to be reapplied every 3 to 5 years. So depending on how often you're looking forward to restaining your deck, that could be considered a con. Solid stains have 100% opacity and are quite similar looking to paint. This means that no grain will show through. However, you might see some wood pattern come through. They will provide the best protection against sunlight out of all of the stain choices. This is a great option if you have an older deck that's got some unappealing looking wood that you want to cover up. Plus, there's tons of color options when it comes to solid stains. You have pretty much the same selection that you would with paint. We often like to paint decks the same color as a trim on the house. They tend to complement each other well. One of the biggest cons, like I mentioned, is that you won't see the grain showing through the wood. So if you have a beautiful cedar deck, maybe going with a solid stain isn't the best choice for you. And once you apply a solid coat of stain, it's virtually impossible to backtrack. So you're never going to get that natural looking wood finish ever again, unless you replace your deck. One final thing to be aware of is that solid stain can be quite slippery when wet, depending on how much texture you have in your wood. Is it better to paint or to use solid stain? If you're planning on finishing your deck, fence, or pergola, I would definitely recommend using a solid stain over paint. The difference is that solid stain will penetrate the wood, protecting it from within while also creating a protective barrier on the surface, whereas paint only sits on the surface, protecting it as long as that barrier is still there. If you paint, you'll also need to use a primer, so using stain will save you some time there. Another advantage to using a solid stain over paint is that it tends to peel off in a really thin layer, whereas paint flecks off in large flakes, creating an elevation difference between the painted surface and the substrate. That's basically going to result in a lot more prep time with a painted surface. You're going to need to sand down those areas where paint has flaked off, whereas with the stain deck, it's going to be minimal sanding in order to get those elevation differences pretty level. From our experience, it's definitely wiser to use a solid color stain because it's going to save you way more time on the reapplication process in the years to come. Can you paint over a stained surface? That depends on the condition of the wood. If the stain is worn out, then yeah, you can go ahead and paint. The best way to test this is to pour some water over your deck or fence or pergola and see whether it's absorbed or whether it beads up. If it's absorbed, then the stain is pretty much worn out and no longer active or present. If the water beads up, then stain is still providing a protective barrier and painting over it will not be effective. If an oil-based stain was previously used, then it's best to get a specialized primer before painting so that your water-based paint will be accepted by your substrate. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Drop me a comment below if you got any questions. Like and sub if you enjoyed. Take it easy.